Welcome to the Speak and Get What You Want podcast. It's great to be here with you again with TK Stratton. I'm Chad Kerby and excited to dive into a principle that we talk a lot about, TK. One that if you fully recognize and utilize, it really can change your success in business and in life. And that's the energy principle. Now, I talk about this main principle, but in reality, there are several layers of it, including tonality, and we'll get into that in just a minute. But TK, in the book, Speak and Get What You Want, we talk about people match your energy in 3 minutes or less. But since we've published the book and since we've practiced and really watched this principle work, you're going to take it, or you suggested to me the other day that you don't believe it's 3 minutes anymore, that it's 3 seconds. And why is that? Why do you say that?
You and I just talked and we've had this before. I think everyone's had that. Your mom calls you when you're a little kid and there's two different things like, "Hey, where are you?" And then there's another, "Where are you?" you know, and immediately kind of what where she's at with the feeling of it. And I think we've all experienced that in some level, at home, with our family, at business. Immediately how someone is feeling about you, probably in seconds.
Oh, no question. No question. And furthermore, like we recognize it and we know it's real, but sometimes we don't manage it very well. And what I mean by that is we go in and we hear our mother's tone, or if we go into a business setting and we're like, okay, we've got this deal we want to close or whatever it is. And the person on the other side of the table or the person on the other side of the phone seems to have the energy that you're not hoping for. So what we naturally do, TK, is we mirror their energy. So if they're down or if they're frustrated or if they're discouraged, we often mirror that. And the key is having the discipline to upping their energy by us maintaining our high energy. And that's something that you're really, really good at, TK. You're always, whenever I call you or whenever I interact with you, your energy is always something that boosts me and lifts me up. But I know that's not just the case. You can't be happy like that all the time. So how do you intentionally keep your energy high so that the people around you want to match that energy? What is it that you do?
It's something we all have to work on. I have to work on it all the time, because you can be having a bad day or something just happened at work and it's, you're thinking about it and then someone calls you and immediately people can tell if something's wrong. I think you've had that, when you've called someone, you're like, "Hey, how's it going?" Like almost immediately say, "Hey, what's going on? You seem down," or
Right.
whatever. So I think it's something to be very, very aware of. And that's something that I'm so excited for this podcast we're doing today, because I think it's a good reminder for all of us when we call someone, when we're talking to them, how we express ourselves through our tone can really communicate how we're feeling or what we're going through without us even knowing it. And there's roughly 30 different tonalities that we use every day that we don't even realize that we're using all the time. And so we got to be very careful with how our tone is, because that will display the energy of how we're feeling to someone immediately. And it's literally within 3 seconds. And
And
so you can, right when you answer the phone, if you have a higher tonality, "Hey, how's it going?" People are like, "Oh, I'm glad I'm talking with you," or it'd be like, "Hey, what's going on?" There's a massive difference. And it's something that isn't recognized enough. I think it's way overlooked when we call someone or talk to them, just that little bit of tone difference. "Hey, how you doing?" Or, "Hey, how's it going?" Massive difference between those two.
it, it,
And
it really is. It's so big. So big. And TK, we know it. I mean, we even use the word. So all of us, in fact, when you and I have gone out and spoken at conferences, we'll ask the question, we'll say, how many of you have been with somebody that when you're with them, you feel like you can accomplish anything? that you can just go crush it. You're so excited because you're with that person. And without
Totally.
fail, everyone raises their hand, right? But then we say, conversely, how many of you know that person that when you're with them, you want the world to end immediately, right? And it's and they're so down. They're always depressing. And in fact, and I'll ask the audience,
Yeah.
we'll ask the people we're talking to, TK, we'll say, what do you usually call that individual? And oftentimes people will say, draining. That person
Yep.
is draining. And so, and it literally is like draining the energy, right? It's like my wife. My wife loves to take baths, right? And when you unplug that stopper and that water just sucks right out of the tub, right? That's your positive energy with certain people because they just have that ability to drain. And
Yeah.
so the key is in all of this, and as we're discussing this, TK, and we were going to talk about this a little later in this episode, but the key in all this is, you mentioned it earlier, is being aware, being
Yeah.
self-aware. I read a study where they had studied the top 700 or so top CEOs in America, and they looked for the one characteristic that they all had in common. And I thought that it was, I thought that it was maybe driven or passionate or all the work ethic, all those different things. But the reality is, what they discovered is top leaders in America in business have a high level of self-awareness, and they are able to be aware of the energy. And so, by the way, the first thing you have to do is make sure that you recognize it. As you said, TK, the first thing is make sure you're aware of the energy. And you are, TK, even when you're frustrated, that phone call comes in and you have to be like, okay, I can't let the person on the other end feel the energy that I'm maybe dealing with right
Yeah.
now. And it,
Yeah. Yeah. It's some, I've we've all had those conversations where, or that person is calling you and you're like, man, I don't want to answer the phone right now, because it just
right.
drains all the energy out. And everyone listening to this, you've had that person, like, or that time, like, gosh, dang it, I don't want to answer this phone. But I never want to be that person, that is on that side when I'm calling someone that, man, I don't want to be that person like, it's TK. I don't want to answer the phone, you know? And that starts with just not, with changing your tone, because you can come off with just a really down tone if that's how you're feeling like, oh man, I'm glad you answered, I just want to dump everything on you, and people don't want that. And I think it's really important that we are self-aware to not be that person, to be that when that person does call us, we can change that energy really quick. Hey, what's going on? You had a bad day? Let's talk about it. That little bit of higher tonality is huge, and it will change all of the conversations immediately right when you call someone. And
And
that's what perks people open to talking with you.
well, in fact, TK, you've had this experience, as have I, where they actually changed what they were going to say to you because of the tonality that you brought to the table. They'd say, "Oh, never
Yeah.
mind, never mind."
Yeah. Yeah, it opens up opportunities. Like, hey, actually, I was thinking about something. I totally agree with you. But it's important that we just are try to be those people that lift others rather than be the ones that drain people down. And
Right.
so I just try. I think it's good for all of us to just think about that. How can we answer the phone differently? How can we greet someone differently just by raising our tonality? Because that communicates something totally different. It starts the immediate conversation differently if we all practice that.
It really does. It really does. And before we get into tonality a little bit here, TK, when it comes to energy and making sure we're managing and self aware of our energy, it will eventually become just a habit for you. And I know it's become just a habit for you that you answer the phone a certain way, you show up a certain way, and that level of energy just becomes a habit, and it eventually becomes
Yeah.
who you are. Now, it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that it that's who you are right now, but the more you practice it, the more you work at it, then it really becomes who you are. And then
Yeah.
people are saying, "Oh man, I love talking to TK. I feel so much better every time I talk to him." And I know my wife Cassie will say all the time, "I can tell when you've been on the phone with TK because your energy and your positivity has been matched, or he's helped you bring it up, and it changes everything." And it's powerful.
That's nice. I'm glad I paid her before the show. So
Yeah, right. And TK and I years ago, I had a client. His name was Colin Receiver. How great of a name is that, Colin? Okay. But Colin, one time he called me and I just answered the phone as you and I have worked on to do over the years. And he paused and he said, "Chad, I want you to be my alarm clock every day." Right. And he goes, "Because you just get me excited for the day." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And I wasn't even thinking.
that'd be cool. It's a Chad Kirby alarm clock. Yeah, I think I
No,
want one of those.
yeah, trust me, no one wants that. But the reality is it comes into that tonality. And
Yeah.
so being self-aware of the tonality, and I know TK that you talked about all the different tonalities that we could potentially use, but let's just focus on four. Okay? Let's focus on four. And the first one being that low tonality, right? That you referenced there where you're like, oh,
Right.
and fortunately, sometimes our loved ones, or in our cases, our spouses, will sometimes get our low tonality because we've been working and hard every day. But we got to be careful to not get caught up too much in that low tonality because it's
Right. I
it's
think that that's a really common one. I think that we probably hear the low one more often during the day than we do anything else,
oh, I
if you
agree
notice, you know?
totally.
But yeah, I agree with you. I think there's 4 basic ones. There's really like 30, but if we go over just the first 4 and you can get those down, it changes your whole conversations every
It
time.
it absolutely does, with that first one being low tonality. In fact, TK, for so many years, you were in the restoration business. And so you met people on their worst day of the week, right? So like when your company would show up at somebody's house, it was a fire, flood, earthquake, not too many tornadoes there in Arizona, but you met people on some of their worst days of their lives. And
Yeah.
and their tonality sometimes was tough.
Yeah, and that's where like a lot of the trainings that you do with our company really helped, making the situation all about them rather than, hey, I'm the right guy for the job. You should sign my paperwork. We're going to do all such and such. Sometimes you just want to just talk about them. But I was often really excited for people when they saw those situations because I saw the end product when it was done because I knew their insurance company was probably going to pay for everything. They were going to get a brand new house, and if you approach them that way with, the what the end is going to be and what this relationship could be and what everything's going to be finished, man, I'm actually happy for you. I know that sounds, maybe some people could view that as cruel or whatever because you just went through that. I view it as like I'm happy for what you're going to be able to end up with at the end of the day. And that little bit of tonality rather than showing up, oh man, this is bad. Oh, this has got to be rough. I don't know anyone who wants to hear that,
Right.
you know.
Right.
And there's a difference between being empathetic and just being down, a downer, an energy, you know, drainer, like what you said, and that low tonality. Oh man, this is bad. That can just make it worse.
No question. And so then that first one, that low tonality, then the second one, TK, is normal tonality. And typically, TK, when I watch you, if we use the restoration experience as an example for a moment, you wanted to get them to the third one, which was high tonality. Okay. So you start low tonality, normal tonality, high tonality. But you often didn't start at high tonality because you'd walk in and they just lost their house, or their kitchen was just burned down, and you would come in normal tonality, and then you'd shift their energy up to high tonality or higher energy. And so tell us, why is it so important that you understand where their current energy is so that you can get them to where they want to be.
Yeah. I think it starts right out, like we talk about those first 3 seconds, and this is what you and I practice a lot, and all of us should practice. But when you first meet someone, I think using that higher tonality right away is what brings the energy up real quickly. Like right when you answer the phone, like, hey, how are you doing? You know, and then they're going to come in, and rather than a low or normal, they'll actually, if you notice, they'll lift their tone a little bit when they, oh, hey, how are you? I'm doing well. How are you? You'll notice their tonality will follow yours. They'll go a little bit higher and be almost happy that they're talking with you, because you just changed the whole energy just from immediately coming in with a higher tonality. So I feel if you start off with a higher tonality right away, then you can kind of come back down. Oh, I'm good. Yeah, things are going well. And then you can lower the tonality a little bit above just a normal tonality, so you still keep the energy high. But coming in with a high tonality immediately, right when you start the conversation, brings the energy up and brings them up. And so as they bring their tone up, now you can bring your tone back down to where theirs is. And it was already higher than what they were going to come in with initially. So already you've lifted them to a certain level on, we'll call it a ladder, this, 4 tonality ladder. You've already lifted them from a downer all the way to at least normal. And then you came in with a high tonality to kind of come back down to a little above normal, and that changed the whole energy and the whole thing. If you come up immediately right in the first interaction, those first few seconds are so critical with how you talk to someone, because you got to come in really high. Man, it's good to see you. Hey, I'm so glad you called. That high tonality rather than, oh, I'm glad you called. There's a massive difference, and it's often way overlooked, because that's how those conversations really get going and trusting, and people like talking with you because the energy just got lifted.
Right, right. So TK, so you came in with the high. So keep in mind, and using the restoration example here for a moment, they had just had a flood. Okay, so they just flooded their basement, right? And I had a friend that this just happened to a couple of weeks ago. They had an unfinished basement. TK, actually, the flooring was in, but that was it. And they had one of the pipes, the toilet pipes, and one of
Yeah.
their kids kicked a ball, a rugby ball or something, and it cracked. Just the way it hit, it was just a fluke accident, and they had all that not so good water all over their
Yeah.
base, and they were at the height of frustration. And then when they talk to the insurance companies aren't known for their high tonality, right? That's not
Yeah.
what they do. In fact, they felt very discouraged. But then you have someone like your company, TK, one of your former companies, they come in, like you said, with that burst of high energy, that burst of high tonality being, okay, things are going to be okay. In fact, this may end up being a great blessing for you, because let me show you what can happen. And you help them. Then you can go back into that normal tonality and go and swap back and forth from
Right.
that normal tonality, that high tonality, but you're giving them hope and excitement for their future.
Right. Right. Even in a bad situation, or even if they're calling and complaining to you, if you come in with that high tonality, I'm so glad you called. I'm so glad you let me know this. So let's talk about it. And then you can kind of go through it at more of a normal tonality, but a little above normal. So it still seems very positive, and you're looking for a direction on how you can move forward to fix the problem. And
Uh,
that just helps people look forward into the future rather than thinking about the past so much.
right. That's exactly right.
That's the magic of tonality. It's you are not dwelling so much on the past. If you keep the tonality low, you're going to continue to dwell on the past, on all the bad that's happened. If you change the tonality to high, it literally changes people from thinking so much about what happened to, okay, how can we move forward?
Wow.
That's the magic of tonality. It's
Right.
critical.
And so the magic tonality also connects, TK, a little bit in what you've mentioned in previous podcasts, talking about giving away self-esteem. giving away so that you're making everybody feel better about themselves. And the more you give away self-esteem, and I don't want to slaughter your quote, but the more self-esteem you give away, the more you have. It's something along those lines, right?
Yeah.
And so when you're going with tonality, what you're doing is helping people feel optimistic about themselves. So as you are self-aware of your own situation, okay, as you're self-aware of your own energy, then it enables you to think about those key steps of tonality, or those key areas of tonality. We talked about low tonality, normal tonality, high tonality, and then the fourth one is crazy high no tonality. TK, crazy high tonality. Effective or less effective?
I think you and I have a friend who's that way, you know. He lives here. We see him sometimes. I think you know what we're talking about.
Right.
But man, comes in, you can way overdo the tonality, like you say, like you're my friend. We love him, you know, he's awesome.
Yeah.
But sometimes we got to tone him down, you know.
Right.
But even that, you know, is brings people up. It makes you smile, but it's too much and it's uncomfortable. So if you come in like, hey, how's it going? You know, just too much, too crazy. Like, wow, what's going on? Hey, I'm so glad to see you. It's too much. You know, then you start invading into people's personal space
Right.
with your tonality, and there you can way overdo it. So you want it higher than normal tonality, especially when you hit them with, "Hey, how's it going?" rather than, "Hey, what's going on?" Like not so crazy, but a little bit under the crazy mark and above the normal mark, so that it just brings people right up, and then you can tone it back down to just a little above normal, right where they are.
Because you spend too much time in that crazy mark, TK. People start driving different streets just to make sure they don't run into you, right? They
Oh
start
yeah,
walking
they think
down.
you're crazy. They
Yeah.
think you're crazy. That's why it's called crazy. You know,
Yeah,
is
that's
they think you're
exactly
crazy.
right. So
So
so be self-aware. Be self-aware of your energy in your mat, and the way people are matching your energy. Two, beware of the tonality. That is key. And when you master those things within yourself, TK, it's amazing what you can accomplish.
yeah.
I think, TK, there's a pretty popular research study where they studied the top 25 tennis players in the world, and they looked to see what separated the top five between the top 25. Does that make sense? And so, what made
Yeah.
those top five a little bit different? And they researched it, and they're like, was it their diet? No. Was it their coaching? No. Was it their training regimen? Regiment? No. It was none of that. So, what was it that separated them from everybody else? And what it was, TK, was their ability to manage their own energy,
Uh,
That's what they discovered. So if they messed up on their serve, or if they had a return that didn't go over the net, they would be like, they'd get frustrated, but then they'd quickly move on and say, it's okay, I got this. And they were able to manage their own energy and be optimistic about the future outcome. Whereas the numbers 6 through 25, they would dwell on that, they'd get frustrated on that, and it impacted their energy. So, isn't it interesting how much impact just this energy principle can have on you, in your performance in business and in life, in all you're doing?
yeah. Yeah. You'll sell more, everything. You know, I remember I walked into this pellet gun place. It wasn't a pellet gun, it's an airsoft gun place. And they got all these airsoft guns. We were doing some work for these people, and it was just fun. We walked in the store like, okay, this is more fun than working, you know. And the guy was so cool. He's just like, hey, what's going on? You know, like, and was so uh entertaining with his tonality. He was just high tonality, high energy. And he says, hey, you got to check this one out. You got to hold this one. And he was so good. I ended up buying an airsoft. I have no purpose for an airsoft. I don't play airsoft, but it was cool because it's fully automatic. It's got all this stuff. And I'm a sucker. I'm a buyer, you know, so it doesn't take a lot. But that just shows you, just because of his tonality and his energy, you know, I bought something.
Oh,
So, and
that's huge.
it was just because of him, like literally just because of him.
And
And
and I know TK, you talk so much about this in your family. You teach it to your children, the energy principle. You teach them. In fact, your wife Michelle was sharing with me um, that she had, I believe, at least one of your children, maybe more, at the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, there in Arizona, and the person behind the desk had such horrible energy that one of your children commented to her like, "Oh my goodness,
yeah,
that's the energy, that real
yeah,
energy principle." And so once you notice it, once you focus on it, it's amazing how much you will recognize it, not only in yourself but in other people as well.
absolutely, absolutely. With the tonality, that's really where the energy starts. Is the tonality.
They go hand in hand. So if you think to yourself, okay, how do I improve my energy? Start Step one is really improving your tonality and what you can do to improve the tonality, which will directly impact your energy. And by the way, directly impact TK your relationships, your business, and really emphasizing that relationship piece. TK, every business I've watched you build, and whether you sold it or kept it, whatever, it has always been heavily based in relationships, in
Mhm.
relationships. And that energy principle drives those relationships.
Yeah, I think that's how all businesses are. You know, it's relationships. It really is. All businesses, you're only as good as your people. You know, and so if you can help build people, and that's important.
Absolutely. Master the energy principle and watch what happens to every other aspect of your life. TK, thank you for what you shared. It is powerful and will definitely translate into being more successful in business and in life.